Would the senator like...
quorum call and ask that it be vitiated.
Without objection.
I wanted to spend some time tonight talking about the budget that's before us and also just some good government things that we can do. You know, if you're a typical American family, husband and wife working, and you're bringing home $3,500 a month, and all of a sudden one of you gets a cut in pay to where now you're bringing $3,000 a month home, what's the first thing you do? The first thing you do, knowing the kind of economic times that we're in, is you start saying what is necessary and what's not. Where can we make up this difference? What can we not spend money on so that, in fact, we're not using our credit cards to finance a living standard that's less than what we have today? And almost every family in America would do that. They'd go through and they'd say, well, utilities are important, food's important, clothing for the kids are important, automobile repair, gasoline's important. But building a new addition onto our house isn't important right now. It needs to wait. Going to the movies may not be important. Going out to eat may not be important in terms of the list of priorities. And so every family would look at what their expenditures are and say, where do we cut spending? This budget does just exactly the opposite of that. We have markedly declining revenues, and we're going to increase spending $1.3 trillion. And the net effect of that is not so much that we might want to do good things for people, is that we're going to be doing those good things by taking the money, not from us, and not even from our kids, but from our grandkids. So within this budget, the real budget, the Obama budget, is the plans for us to grow government spending over the next 10 years to a level we've never seen before and at a rate of growth that we've never seen before. Why would we do that? We wouldn't do it with our own home and our own family. We certainly wouldn't do that with our own business. Why is it that Congress thinks, and this budget purports, that we can borrow our way and spend our way out of the financial difficulty? And the fact is we can't. We cannot do that. It is impossible for us to do that. And the dreaded secondary effect of that is to cripple potential growth in the future. And let me explain how that works. As we go from $11 trillion of debt to $30 trillion of debt, what's going to happen to us? How much inflation ultimately will come about because we do that kind of borrowing? Well, what will happen is everything that you have will cost more that you try to buy, and everything that you own will be worth less. So what we're doing is we are generationally thieving, stealing money for us today so that we don't have as much problem recognizing the pain. What is called for in our country today is not growing the government, it's shrinking the government. Here's what we do know, according to GAO and IG reports that are published, that any American can find, that out of the money that we do spend every year, at least $380 billion of it is lost to fraud, duplication, or waste. Nowhere in this budget is there any attention to any of that. Not one place is there attention to it. My friend, President Obama, campaigned on the fact that the first thing he was going to do was a line-by-line analysis of every department, of every program, and get rid of the things that don't work, and the things that work marginally, make them better. Well, that comes up to $380 billion. That's what it comes up to. So tonight, I'm going to introduce a series of amendments. I know they can't be called up by the consent that we're operating under, but they will be voted on during our votes tomorrow, that are just plain common sense that we would all do with our own business or with our own family, that we would actually put into place. the first thing we would do is we wouldn't give somebody a bonus who's repairing our house who didn't repair our house. Yet every year in this country, this government pays out about $7 billion to bonuses to people who didn't perform. So we create a reserve fund so that we don't do that anymore. Why would we pay? Let me give you some examples. We've paid $8 billion out to contractors for non-performance of bonuses. They didn't perform, but they got paid the bonuses anyhow in the Defense Department. Why would we continue to do that? And I'll be putting into the record throughout the evening the line-by-line areas associated with that. So the First Amendment just says we're going to quit paying for performance that we didn't get. Saves us $8 billion a year. Over the next 10 years, it saves us $80 billion. And what will happen is it'll get voted on, everybody will vote for it, and as soon as it goes to conference, it'll get stripped out. Because that's the game we're playing in the Senate this week. Anything that passes or anything that's a hard vote, we put it in, we'll take it out in conference. But why would we continue to pay extra money for something that didn't perform the way it was supposed to? I'm not talking about not paying the bills. That's a totally different question about absolutely not meeting the contract, but yet we're paying. Let me give you an example. The Census Department had a contract, a no-bid contract with Harris Corporation for handheld recorder devices for the census. The oversight hearings were done in the Senate. We said, what's your plan B in case it doesn't work? Said, no problem, it's going to work, no difficulty. Well, we've now spent $700 million and paid $26 million in bonuses for something that doesn't work, and it's not going to be used by the census. So why would we do that? Why would we allow that kind of thing to continue to happen? And the government is rife with that. So why would we not put a prohibition into the budget that has teeth that says we're not going to pay bonuses for work that didn't meet performance standards? And yet we'll vote on it, and it'll get jerked right out when it goes to conference because of the connectedness of the elite in this country. The second thing I have an amendment creates a reserve fund so that we'll do exactly what President Obama said we would do. And that is a line-by-line analysis of every government program. Does it work? Is it accomplishing what it's supposed to? And if it's not, we should be eliminating it or fixing it. And that may or may not pass, but it'll get pulled out. Even though that was a campaign promise, not only in the campaign, but in his inaugural statement, as well as in his statement to the nation. He has embraced that very idea that we need to do that. Everybody knows we need to do that. If you're running a business, you're running on hard times, you go through everything. What's not working the best, you get rid of what doesn't work the best. What's not working at all, you eliminate. But we don't do that in the federal government. One of the other amendments we're going to have is it says we will apply metrics to every program we have. In other words, we will say, here's the goal, and we will put measurements to whether or not we're achieving the goal. And then we can for sure tell what we're doing. The fact is 50% of the programs aren't living up. 12 specifically have been on the warning list by the GAO for 10 years, and Congress has done nothing about it. And the reason is because they don't want to put a metric because they don't want to know whether it is, because it might cause them to lose a vote with somebody if, in fact, it's not an effective program. So one of the third amendment is to offer a reserve fund to set up metrics so that when we set up metrics and see that things aren't working, we can get rid of it. A fourth amendment that we'll offer is another commitment by President Obama, and he said this time after time after time, and he believes it, I believe it. The question is whether we'll do it, is there ought not to be any no-bid contracts for anything above $25,000. So we mandate that there has to be competitive bidding. Now, Interesting that when we passed the stimulus, we all voted for it. But when it came out of conference, there was no competitive bidding requirement in $870-some billion worth of spending. What does that mean to the average taxpayer? What that means is you're not going to get good value for the money that we're spending. So there's no mandate, even though that's a commitment that was made and we should live up to it. So we'll have an amendment that says no bonuses if you don't earn it. Number 2, line by line going through the budget. Number 3, metrics, performance measurements. Number 4, competitive bidding. And then finally, an amendment I will offer is something that will make a real difference in people's lives today. The senator from Texas and I worked on that during the stimulus. And what it says is if you have an IRA or a 401k and you're underwater on your mortgage and you've got money in that 401k or that IRA and you want to take that money and apply it to your primary residence mortgage where you're underwater, you can do that without a 10% penalty. In other words, we're not going to penalize you for taking money you've saved to get you out of trouble today. That'll be a controversial, I'm sure. But the fact is that's something we could make a big difference on for a lot of families in this country every day because they have money locked up, but we have such a harsh penalty on it. For them to take it out, they have to give the government 10% so they can use it to get themselves out of trouble on their mortgage. There'll be 2 other amendments that I will offer. One will be with Senator McCain on an alternative budget, a budget that describes what we really should do, that will save over $3.5 trillion compared to this budget, that shrinks the size of the federal government, doesn't allow it to grow in terms of non-discretionary spending, except for defense and veterans, fast. It puts a cap on how fast it can grow. It does not raise taxes like this budget does, because the last thing we should do, and we know the history of what we did wrong in the 30s and what we've done wrong in other times, is raising taxes on individuals and corporations at a time when we're in a recession, a deep recession, is exactly the wrong tax policy to create jobs and to get that family back that $500 that they gave up. So we'll be offering all those amendments come tomorrow. The draft budget increases the veteran spending by $25 billion over 5 years to take care of the commitments that we've made to our veterans. It increases the defense spending, which we need to increase rather than decrease in terms of real dollars, by $190 billion. It decreases some of our real problems, which is our mandatory spending, both in Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security, by $3.2 trillion less than what the president's budget and this budget will portend. It doesn't play any games with AMT as far as paying for it. It does not raise taxes. It will reduce the deficit, the cumulative deficit, over the next 10 years by $3.5 trillion. It also will give us $3.5 trillion less debt. It's a budget that reflects a family's budget. It's a budget that reflects the real times that we're in. It's a budget that says we recognize that if we're going to do something for our kids and our grandkids, some sacrifice has to come now. Will people peel at it and shoot at it? You bet. The fact is we've got way too big of a federal government. It's highly inefficient. It wastes at least 10% of everything it does every year, at least. That's a very conservative estimate. And what we're going to put forward is a budget that doesn't do any of those things. You know, when we waste $80 billion a year through fraud in Medicare, just think what that means. That means 20% of the money that's spent in Medicare is defrauded. And our biggest problem is we're not going to be able to keep up with Medicare. And yet we have 20% of it that we're not doing a thing about of getting rid of the fraud and the improper payments. We got at least $40 billion in terms of Medicaid. We have a Medicaid program in here, a health care program that will save the states $880 billion over the next 10 years and save the federal government $400 billion over the next 10 years. That's $1.3 trillion, and it'll cover everybody at a level where every doctor, no matter who they are, will take their insurance and will take the stamp of being a Medicaid patient right off their forehead, and nobody will ever know whether they're a Medicaid patient or not because they'll have an insurance card just like everybody else. And we can buy for them something better than they have today and save $1.3 trillion. Why would we not want to do that? That's in this budget. Why would we not want to do that? Why would we not want to create the opportunity so people have an option instead of going to a nursing home that they can have a program that gives them in-home care and still save us money? Going back to what we were talking about on bonuses, do you realize that CMS paid out $322 million last year to nursing homes that were also on their list as substandard nursing homes? Now think about that. We paid out in excess of $300 million in bonuses to nursing homes that had significant problems in terms of giving the care and meeting Medicare standards in the first place, but we still paid it out. Why would we do that? And why wouldn't we fix that? Well, we don't want to fix it. It's hard to fix. Except this budget fixes that. This budget causes us to not waste as much money. This budget recognizes that we have real problems in our country, and the way to get out of it is not borrow more money and spend more money. It is to be frugal and learn what we were taught from our grandmothers. That if you have a penny, spend it wisely. If you have a dollar, don't spend it all. And if you get fortunate enough to get more than a dollar, make sure you're saving something for the future. We all know that's right, but we don't apply it to the federal government. And so consequently, what will happen is the standard of living of our grandchildren. We're in the midst, we're in a seminal moment in this country where we're going to become on an equal basis with Europe. And what's that equal basis mean? That means that the standard of living in this country is getting ready to drop 30%, both by what we spend and the printed money that's going to come after that in terms of the inflation that's going to devalue everybody else's assets in this country. There's a lot of ways to run this government, but the way we're running it now wouldn't pass muster anywhere in anybody's household. Nobody would throw 10% of their money away every year. Nobody would give bonuses to people who didn't deserve it. Nobody would not make measurements about what they're doing to see if it was working. We need a change. The seminal moment is coming. We may not win the budget battle, but in fact, if we don't win the budget battle, the problems are just going to be that more severe. And the debt load that we will carry with this budget, the president's budget, will shackle the next two generations of this country for their entire lifetime. And with that, I yield the floor.